Well, former Representative George Santos, set to be sentenced today. The 36-year-old faces several years in federal prison after pleading guilty in August to charges of fraud and identity theft. Santos admitting he duped voters by fabricating his life story, deceiving donors, and stealing the identity of nearly a dozen people for profit. Prosecutors are seeking a 7-year prison term. Joining us now, Eric Faddis, criminal defense attorney and good friend of ours. Eric, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you.
Hey, so how does Santos's admission of guilt and restitution promise affect the sentencing factors that the judge must consider in this case?
So Santos is arguing that these are mitigating factors, that these should result in a judge treating him more leniently, that he's accepting responsibility, that he's remorseful for what he did, and that he's agreed to pay back the restitution. However, he has issued some tweets that sort of undermine his alleged remorse, and he said that he cannot pay back that restitution at this time.
Yeah, just when you think a guy couldn't get any dumber, to attack the judge on social media the last couple of days, and then, of course, to ask for delays because of his podcast and things that are just, more absurd than this case itself. The fact that this guy was even elected to a position in Congress. Prosecutors asking for a sentence of 87 months, while Santos's team seeks the 2-year minimum for aggravated identity theft. How do you think the judge actually weighs? I mean, when weighing both sides of this, where do you think the judge will come down with his decision? We can joke around about this guy as much as we want because he was foolish throughout his entire term in Congress, but what he did was illegal and pretty damaging.
Oh, certainly, yeah. So the sentencing guidelines essentially say that the sentencing range for these crimes is between 6 and 10 years. But Santos is asking for a downward departure from that sentencing guideline based on those mitigating factors of showing remorse, a lack of criminal history, agreeing to pay restitution. The judge is going to balance those mitigating factors against aggravating factors, like the seriousness of the crime and the fact that there may have not been much remorse when we look at these tweets where Santos says that he's a scapegoat, even though he's pled guilty to 2 federal offenses.
Are you surprised at all that the current administration hasn't stepped in and said, you know what, we're going to go easy on this guy or anything like that, or have issued the Department of Justice to act accordingly?
I think it was politically advantageous and the right move for the administration not to intervene. I think that would have looked like some apparent bias towards a fellow Republican. Here, they have not chosen to intervene, and the Department of Justice is seeking a rather hefty sentence, a little more than 7 years in prison for George Santos.
Which was kind of interesting because if for someone who was on the Republican side of things and denied everything, the administration really distanced themselves from this guy. It just shows you how egregious this case is for him. His team contends that his political ambition helped shape both the offenses and the government's response. Do we buy into that?
I don't think that makes the crime less bad. With the political corruption is nothing new. We look at Senator Bob Menendez out of New Jersey. He received 11 years for political corruption. This is something the courts deal with reasonably frequently. And the fact that he wanted to be a big shot in politics doesn't make this somehow more lenient.
Now, with Menendez, who you just mentioned, and now with Santos, you think this dissuades people from attempting to skirt the rules when they're running for an office, whether it's local or federal?
I think the court has to consider one of the sentencing purposes, which is deterrence in fashioning its sentence. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the court have a rather heavy hand, I'm guessing somewhere around 6 years, in order to send a message to everybody that, hey, this sort of political corruption and self-aggrandizing in the political sphere via fraud is not going to be tolerated.
Hope he recorded a couple of podcasts before he finds out today. About 10:30, about 2 hours from now, we will find out. Eric, thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
All right, good to see you as always. We'll be following the story all day. Santos expected in court, as I mentioned, at around 10:30, and we'll bring you the results of his sentencing right here on CBS News New York.